So welcome to our latest edition of the New England Medical Cannabis Seminar and Support Group. I'm Dr. Stefana Pecher, the country doc, and thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you especially Susan Meehan, who's giving us another presentation and sharing in her wisdom. So welcome, Susan, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm Susan Meehan. I am one of the founding members of Maine Children for Cannabis Therapy. It's a volunteer organization in Maine that helps connect children who need cannabis as a medication who's recommended by their doctor to treat conditions that are approved in the state of Maine. And we connect them with caregivers who are willing to make specific formulations for them, which is very difficult at the dispensary level, but it works really well at the smaller caregiver level in the state of Maine. I'm also the national secretary for an organization called Parents for Pot, and that organization is a group that works on educating the public and on assisting people who are convicted on marijuana charges, who are in jail and may have children at home, a spouse at home trying to support a family. We help a lot through a holiday drive in which we provide presents for these children, sometimes who are asking for things like gas cards to go visit their incarcerated parent. So we helped over 50 families this year and bought everything on their Christmas lists. So it was a great success. It's an organization that helped my family when we were medical refugees in the state of Maine. And I'm going to tell a little bit about our story and why we moved from our homeland here, Connecticut, to the state of Maine. So my daughter's name was Cindy May, and she was the first on so many fronts in the cannabis industry, or the marijuana industry, medicine-wise. Cindy May was the first in the state of Maine to use THCA tincture as a daily anti-seizure medication. She was the first to document the use of THC orally, rectally, and inhaled as a seizure rescue medicine. And thanks to our lawmakers really listening to us in 2015, Cindy May was the first person in the country to go to school with her marijuana-based medication by her side, right in the capital of Maine in Augusta at Coney Middle School. This phenomenal medical marijuana program has succeeded against a governor who's truly been against it and who has often roadblocked the Department of Health and Human Services from properly managing the department. The program has allowed children like Cindy May to discontinue the use of powerful barbiturates, benzodiazepines, and other powerful drugs that trigger the opiate receptors in the brain. On these powerful combinations of medications, Cindy May still had thousands of seizures a day, ranging from partial focal seizures, quick burst myoclonic drop seizures, to several generalized tonic-clonic seizures a day. When we first came to Maine, we came with a child bound to a wheelchair, a child who used to love to eat but was losing weight so rapidly she was approaching a diagnosis of failure to thrive, and a child who watched life from the sidelines in a wheelchair. Before we moved to the state of Maine, living here in Connecticut, we begged Connecticut's legislature to bring on pediatric cannabis use and to legalize pediatric marijuana use medically. And we failed in that year. And we were at our wits' end. Our neurologist actually recommended we get Cindy May to a state where we could try marijuana legally for her because she had no other medical options. We had tried over 23 different anti-epilepsy medications. We tried several specialized diets to treat epilepsy, and we tried a couple of different surgeries to try epilepsy, including an implant called a VNS, or a vagus nerve stimulator. And she still had these thousands of seizures a day at that point. So in the state here of Connecticut, after we begged the legislator to change the law and couldn't get it changed, at our wits' end with Cindy May, we tried marijuana with Cindy May here in the state of Connecticut before we ripped our family apart at the seams. And suddenly we went 90 days seizure-free using marijuana with Cindy May here at home. And the grower in the state of Connecticut, my friend Jason, was arrested on the 45th day, and the garden was destroyed and all the plants were destroyed. On the 90th day, we ran out of medicine, and on the 92nd day of using cannabis, Cindy May was in the hospital in Hasbro and Providence in status seizures, constant seizing, and drugged into a coma. And there were only a couple people on earth that knew what happened and why she had gone from seizure-free to suddenly back in status and unable to stop these seizures with any pharmaceutical. So we worked on getting her to Maine fast. It was the closest. We were in Rhode Island, where it is a legal state. However, we didn't know the people who we could get the formulations that we needed for Cindy May in the state of Rhode Island, and we didn't have any place to live in Rhode Island. We found a place in Maine very fast, and we moved her up there, and we discovered an amazing thing. We didn't find the same strain that the police had destroyed here in Connecticut, and we never went longer than maybe 40 days seizure-free. The longest stretch of seizure-free that Cindy May had ever experienced was here in Connecticut on the strain called Carmelicious that she was using from this grower here in Connecticut, but we had no backup to that strain. So, but in Maine, Cindy May, we found, loved to swim in the cold water rapids. She was no longer sensitive to extreme temperature temperature changes. She climbed play structures, including straight up rock walls. She pumped her own swing. She ate her own meals and then some. And we found a child who laughed boisterously, who loved deeply, and could finally express herself and express her emotions. She lived and loved life. With a devastating diagnosis of Dravet syndrome, we could not stop Cindy May's death. And after 30 days admission to a hospital for a new seizure type, Cindy May was so tired in January of 2016. We came home to Maine after this January hospitalization after 30 days, and Cindy May was still having 20 of these new seizure types an hour. And her neurologist, again, was at wit's end. We tried everything in the hospital, and pharmaceutical toolbox was empty, and he advised us to get her back to Maine and start trialing new strains of marijuana as a last resort to control this new seizure type. When we were in the hospital and they were again introducing pharmaceuticals, with every single pharmaceutical they introduced, not only didn't stop the new seizure type, but also brought back the other seizure types that we had under control with her cannabis. So we got her home, we got back control of the other kinds of seizures she was having, and we tried a new strain of CBD, which she actually was very sensitive to. You find that a lot of the public notion and the notion across the country is that CBD is for children because it doesn't give you that high, but Cindy May actually used a whole lot of THC, especially as a seizure rescue medication, and she used THCA, the acidic form of THC, to control most of her daily seizures and all of her myoclonic jerks. She literally had thousands of myoclonic jerks an hour prior to using THCA. So when we got her back to Maine in February of 2016, we tried a strain called, now known as May's Canatonic. It was then known as Norwegian Moose Lodge. And May's Canatonic, in less than 1 milligram a day, stopped this new seizure type. And we had her back. And in the next 40 days, we swam in an indoor water park. We built snow castles, we snow tubed, we sledded, and we started to build back some endurance. When Cindy May fell asleep on that mostly normal day on March 13th of 2016, she colored, she read some books with her daddy, and she played and laughed with her little cousin Emma. And she had her breakfast. She fell asleep on her daddy's chest, and at some point in time, she drew her last breath. She passed peacefully in her sleep, in one of her favorite places in the world, on her daddy's chest and her daddy's arms, from sudden unexplained death and epilepsy. And that's always a hard tale to tell. But it's important, and I keep telling her story because we have to remember the lessons that Cindy May brought us and Cindy May taught us. Marijuana was the best medicine for her. It gave her life, and it didn't check her out in a drugged coma or a drugged fog. She really was able to express herself for the first time in her life and express her emotions and get angry about missing the rest of her family because we had to move out of Connecticut and into Maine. Marijuana is safer than any other medicine in our medicine cabinets. It's safe in hospitals, it's safe as a medicine in our schools, and it's safe in homes. So it's a life-sustaining, necessary nutrient with cannabinoids found in other plants, including in human breast milk. So that's my introduction, and I thought today I'd keep it kind of short and leave room for questions and answers. So if we could move on to things that you'd like to know, either about Cindy May or about cannabis in general, using to treat conditions, I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Any questions? We can open it up. I know that you, if we could just speak into the microphone for the TV's sake.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Presently, what is the status of Connecticut as far as giving the medical marijuana to pediatric patients in schools. Are the nurses allowed to administer?
Connecticut currently is legal for pediatric patients. In October of 2016, the bill was signed and passed by your governor here, and it was actually deemed as Cindy May's law by your governor. I don't think it was ever, unfortunately, officially changed. He forgot to change the name officially to Cindy May's Law, but he did the bill signing in her honor and gave us, and we were present at the bill signing, and he gave us the paperwork. So it is approved for pediatric use, and it's only approved in the state of Connecticut in its non-combustible form for kids. So if you have a pediatric patient who is approved, they have to buy a tincture or an oral medication, and they cannot buy just bud from the dispensaries here for children, which is okay. It's a start. It's just that some parents, like in the state of Maine, process their own medication from bud and make an extraction using alcohol in their own kitchens. Connecticut is a lot different than the state of Maine, but at least they do allow pediatric use. And when they first opened for pediatrics, they actually invited me down for a class for the pharmacy folks who are making medications to ask what I would recommend for kids. So they actually carry a full line of THCA, THC, and CBD tinctures specifically for children, but that could also be purchased by adults and used for conditions. Anyone else?
Donnie? I have some questions for her.
You mentioned THCA. How do you work that in? You mentioned, is it tinctures or is it in just tinctures, or are there other forms too that you use it?
It's a good question. THCA can be obtained in tinctures in Connecticut at your dispensaries, specifically because they were meeting the pediatric needs. Shatter is also something that is, I'm not sure if it's available in Connecticut because it's a BHO it's a BHO extraction. I know that Connecticut can do a CO2 extraction, and the concentrates are THCA until you apply heat. So the thing with THCA is it remains THCA. Cannabis has THCA in it until heat is applied to it. So if you buy a CO2 extraction, even if it's a concentrate, it's still THCA until you burn it or use it in a vape pen and apply a temperature above 280 degrees to it. So if you don't prefer an oral tincture, you can buy a concentrate in Connecticut that is THCA. Does that answer the question?
Were you talking about the raw form?
Yeah,
Donnie like smoothies or whatever.
Really?
Like leafy. In Rhode Island, they can make a shake and a smoothie with coconut oil or whatever they want in their turmeric. But
Can I see your menu, please?
Here you can't.
Yeah, let me see the Connecticut menu. I'm pretty sure has. This is the menu from your Montville dispensary. And let's see, I think it's on this side. Oral tinctures. I don't see a THCA, which is really atrocious. It ought to be here.
They did say that the menu changes.
Yeah.
It probably does, and they also may issue a separate menu for pediatric. I know they have an oral tincture of THCA for patients, and the Connecticut dispensaries all use the same pharmacy network. So it's interesting they do not have it. Yeah, I don't see an A on here. And it's so simple and so unfortunate that you can't even obtain leaves in the state of Connecticut, because you could actually just juice the leaves of a marijuana plant and obtain THCA. So you would have to specifically ask the dispensaries, and they were carrying THCA for pediatric patients in a tincture form. I'm not sure if they still are.
What I've done is I've taken the dry product and use an oil. Extract those oils out of the plant.
Yes.
And that would be THCA in there.
Correct.
Because I haven't used a enough heat to crack it,
Right.
so to speak.
So you could make THCA at home by purchasing bud or by acquiring bud, and you could soak it in an olive oil, or you could soak it in a liquid coconut oil, and you could soak it for like 30 days and then strain the oil and you'd have THCA. Another way to extract it that we do frequently in Maine is via grain alcohol that we actually purchase here in the state of Connecticut, because you can't purchase grain alcohol in Maine. So you could purchase 190 proof grain alcohol, and you waste a whole lot less of the cannabinoids if you extract them. If you extract the cannabinoids using an oil soak, even at 30 days, you're still leaving a lot of cannabinoids in the product. And I've actually tested this where I've done an alcohol soak. I have one person who I've helped whose child is extremely sensitive to alcohol. Like, a restaurant spilled a beer on this child once, and the child had massive seizures and status seizures. So she's very sensitive to alcohol. So even though alcohol evaporates at such a low temperature, they couldn't use an alcohol extraction just in case any alcohol were kept in it. So we did an oil extraction, and then after that was processed, I took the bud and I soaked it in alcohol, and I did the extraction and the evaporation and had it lab tested, and we still had a significant amount of cannabinoids and a resulting tincture from that alcohol soak. So what we do in Maine is, I actually have it on Cindy May's Facebook page in the files. There's a page in Facebook called Cindy May Smiles, and it's Cindy May is CYNDIMAE, and then Smiles is S''MILES, and that's a Facebook group. And in that group I have files with directions on how to extract THCA, THC, and CBD. And CBDA is something I never had used successfully with Cindy May, but I do know of other pediatric patients using it for seizure control with a blend of the acidics and the non-acidics. So CBDA would be the same thing, taking a bud that is primarily CBD and extracting it without using heat with the alcohol soak and evaporating off the alcohol. When we evaporate that for the acidics, we're very careful about applying heat, so it takes a lot longer to evaporate, but we evaporate it in a vegetable dehydrator using only a fan and no heat. The alcohol evaporates over the course of a couple of days without heat, and then you're left with the acidics, which is a great medicine. THCA is an amazing anti-inflammatory. It's an amazing painkiller, and it doesn't have that high effect. You're not going to get stoned off of THCA, but for some patients, it's just a miracle worker as a pain control and an anti-inflammatory for things like arthritis. So.
Excellent.
Any other questions?
Just to add on that, I use the coconut oil and it, make a salve out of it, or an oil.
It's a great
it melts
topical.
at 74 degrees.
Right.
And just apply it wherever there's pain, and it just
It's
goes
an
away.
amazing topical. Yes.
I mean, I tell people about it, they say, that can't be.
It doesn't seem possible, but
Until you
it's
try it, then you
amazing.
go,
Wow.
wait a minute, where did
Right.
that pain go?
Yeah, it's better than Bengay without the heat effect.
Without the smell.
Right, and the smell. Well, different smell.
Do you have a question? How about anybody over here? Any questions?
If you want to get.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Obviously, if you're able to work with THCA and CBDA in Maine, you're using fresh leaf. When will Connecticut be able to grow our own?
Well, that's up to Connecticut legislators, and it's not looking promising. Just 2 days ago, Connecticut tabled there was a bill in process to allow opiate addiction as a qualifying condition, and that was tabled. And so far, they have not been receptive to legalizing growing here or legalizing recreational use here, which is a shame. It's a plant, and thousands of people are arrested every day for it. And even with legalization on board, we still have arrests happening in Maine for unauthorized growing and such. So it's a terrible thing, and that's why I work with Parents for Pot to end prohibition. But it's not an easy course. They put a lot of people in jail over this. And THCA could be acquired either from the bud, or if you were growing at home, just a few leaves a day could be juiced to provide that and other nutrients. It's awful.
Well, one of our local politicians that we have befriended over the years, Jonathan Harris, who was the former commissioner for the Department of Consumer Protection, he actually spearheaded this movement in Connecticut for the medical marijuana laws.
Yes, Jonathan and his staff were phenomenal. We spent hours at the State House arguing for this bill the first year, and we were there all kinds of late hours. It was unbelievable. And he and his staff presented this and answered every question under grilling testimony against a couple of particular representatives who were very against the program, and through all kinds of lies, straight out lies about how dangerous and how awful marijuana was and how many people it killed, and it's never known to have killed a single person. But this particular representative fought Jonathan and his staff for hours on end.
Really?
In the legislature. Yes.
Wow. Well, Jonathan is now running for governor.
That's amazing.
And he has some very good ideas and thoughts on repurposing and just common sense approach. So we've been helping him a little bit with that. So that's probably someone who has vision, in the right direction. Yeah.
Yes.
But Susan, so tell us, we were going to do a cooking class and actually
We were.
a demonstration, and we still may down the road, but we wanted to be in full compliance with
Let's make
all
sure.
the changes and things like that.
Never
So,
quite.
but we could talk about that a little.
We definitely could.
know?
We make we make gummies in Maine, and they seem to be like a major popular item because they're so easy. We make them in a mold that makes 160 gummies in a single mold, and we make a THCA, a CBD, and a THC one. We'll probably be adding CBDA eventually to that mixture, but given the three different gummies, people can kind of experiment with them and take them and figure out which one helps their condition, or which ones they'd prefer to take at nighttime before bed, which ones make them tired, because it's definitely different cannabinoids that make a different person. It's a unique individual thing. For example, Cindy May, THC and CBD actually made her very awake and very alert, whereas THC tends to make people quieter and calmer, and CBD is often used to calm anxiety. But for Cindy May, it was almost the opposite. Too much CBD actually caused her great anxiety and agitation and brought back days of her like hitting her head against the wall. So CBD was very ineffective in higher doses for Cindy May. And THC was amazing at stopping her seizures. It was the best seizure rescue medication we ever knew to work for Cindy May in the shortest amount of time. It would stop a seizure in about 20 seconds. And this is a child who used to seize for hours on end, sometimes days on end, like 4 days in the PICU and seizures, or in a coma to stop the seizures. And THCA, on the other hand, was her daily medication, and it stopped all of her myoclonic seizures, except when she was sick. We'd have to up the dose sometimes. But THCA made her a little sleepy, so her doses were arranged so she took a lower dose at the morning and afternoon dose and a higher dose of THCA at night. So the gummies give people an opportunity to figure out what works for them when and what time of day. And my cousin Linda actually makes, she's a pro at making gummies for herself and anyone in the household who wants to trial them, who's a legal patient or an adult. And currently that's just her and I. But the gummies are amazing because they're so easy. We make them in a little square mold, and it's just it's such a simple recipe. If you can acquire the concentrate here in the state of Connecticut, and I know you can purchase the THC or the CBD concentrates here, and apparently not the THCA, but you could make your own. When you use those concentrates, we use about 1 gram of the concentrate per batch, a third a cup of water, 1 package of Jell-O, a flavor that you choose, and we actually color code ours so that all our green ones are THC and all our red ones are THCA and our blue ones are CBD. But whatever colors you choose is fine. And then we use 1 package of a unflavored gelatin with that third cup of water, package of sugar Jell-O, and a package of the non-flavored gelatin, and 1 teaspoon of lecithin. Lecithin helps things stay mixed. It's used in a lot of products to to keep things mixed. Once it's mixed together, it keeps them mixed. So we'll often add lecithin to tinctures and or our gummies so that they stay mixed well. We do that in 30 seconds. We heat it the first time, mix it up with a little wire whisk, put it back in for 30 seconds in the microwave, and then we pour it into the molds. So it's a very easy, we were going to demonstrate it, but like Dr. Stefana said, we weren't quite sure of the laws here in the state of Connecticut and how they would approve or disapprove of that. So that is something that we'll hopefully seek approval for. And maybe we can do it with a CBD isolate that is legal in all 50 states that I can acquire.
Or even an essential oil of a
Or an
different
essential
kind,
oil.
just as an example.
We could do it with any. We could just do gummies for the sake of making gummies. But that's pretty much the recipe, but we can email it to you. Yes. Yeah. That's it.
Connecticut doesn't allow candies,
I can, yeah.
so
That's
you
the
wouldn't find
problem.
that in the dispensary. In Rhode
Yeah.
Island, yes.
I can add it to the Cindy May files on the Facebook group that
Yeah.
I gave you also. So it is legal in the, well, you can make gummies in the state of Connecticut. You just might not be able
Can't
to
buy
medicate them,
Yeah, yes.
legally.
Yeah.
So that's,
Susan, you spoke about Maine being a reciprocal state for Connecticut.
correct.
Is Rhode Island reciprocal?
Yes, at last time I knew, Rhode Island was reciprocal.
So if we
and
wanted
allowed
gummies
us.
or to have a smoothie, we could show our card in Rhode Island?
Well, we're getting mixed.
There's usually a process to that because the problem is, like, technically in Maine, when you come up there and you purchase a product, you're purchasing it, as far as they're concerned, to use it in the state of Maine. So you're on vacation in the state of Maine for a week or whatever, you're purchasing it to use there in the state of Maine. They're not authorizing you to bring it across the state borders. So it's still illegal for you federally to cross state borders with marijuana products. So when you purchase it out of state, you're technically using it there.
Exactly. So if I could go to the Rhode Island dispensary, order a smoothie, drink it in Rhode Island
Right.
with a Connecticut card,
I don't think they let you do that.
Yeah.
they're not going to let me do that?
Although once in a while, somebody will say they were able to, but it's technically no.
I need to be licensed?
Rhode
Well,
Island
in the state of
medical
Maine,
cannabis license.
Yeah.
I have to
So
have
Rhode Island may not be a specific reciprocal. Maine, on the other hand, you could purchase, you get a form from the Department of Health, you fill it in, you show that you have a license in the state of Connecticut, and Maine will give you a temporary form to use while you're on vacation in the state of Maine. But Maine is also legal recreationally now, so as long as you're over the age of 21, you can possess marijuana in the state of Maine, but the process of selling it isn't quite established yet, so there's nowhere to buy it legally, recreationally in the state of Maine yet. But it's there, you just can't legally buy it in the state of Maine yet. So they're working on it.
How about you guys? Any specific questions? No? Oscar? Nothing? Okay. How about any other cooking tips you might have for us, Susan?
If you're trying for like the acidics, the THCA and such, you have to be careful. Like, we still make the gummies with THCA, and it doesn't dissolve without the heat in the Jell-O. You can't possibly do it. But THCA takes, for example, when we decarboxylate marijuana to make a THC concentrate, we usually decarboxylate the marijuana first, which means we apply heat to it in the oven at 275 degrees for at least 30 minutes. We usually do 30 minutes, mix it about in a mason jar. We'll shake it up and then put it back in the oven for 20 more minutes. So no, and that's the important thing is we just do the bud in a mason jar with the cover loosely applied, and we'll decarboxylate it. So when we make the gummies using THCA, we still apply the heat, but because you're only applying 30 seconds of heat and then 30 seconds more of heat, very little of it decarboxylates, if any, because it truly takes a 275 degree temperature, which you're not going to get in water, because water boils off at 212. So you can still make the gummies even though you're applying heat. So to convert THCA to THC, you need a time and temperature to meet the criteria. So you need a temperature of 275 for about 30 minutes. You could do a lower temperature for more time, but it's a combination of time and temperature that takes the acidic component off of the THCA. So that's...
So for someone who's never done it, and you were saying you use a concentrate to make those gummies, how do you make the concentrate exactly? Like just like what you said, you heat it up in a mason jar? Or what do you...
No.
How do you do that?
No, that goes back to the alcohol soak. The grain alcohol here, the 190 proof alcohol that we buy in the state of Connecticut, it soaks, and I'm kind of old school on that, and I guess it's kind of my Mohegan roots too, and old school medicine is I soak it for a full moon cycle, which is a long time, 28 days. But you can soak it. Some people will just rinse the cannabis very quick, like put it in the alcohol and then strain it out within a few minutes after shaking it. Again, I've proven to myself that the 28-day soak gets more out of the cannabis than the quick soak or the quick rinse. They say, some people say that alcohol is a polar medium and is supposed to extract everything right away, but I have done it myself, and that the long soak makes a difference. So I usually soak it in the alcohol in the freezer for about a month, about 28 days, unless there's some need for it. There's some times when I need to help a parent rapidly, and I'll help them in their own kitchen, doing it on their own property legally in the state of Maine, and we'll do it quickly if we have to. If I have to soak it only for 24 hours, we'll do it for only 24 hours, but I prefer the long soak. Once that's done, I strain the alcohol. I strain the alcohol from the cannabis. The cannabis is then garbage or compost material, and there's very rarely any medicine left in it after a 28-day or so soak. Then the alcohol I actually filter from the freezer. There's something called winterization. It's you keep it in the freezer and filter it through a coffee filter. This filters out all the waxes in the cannabis and the chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is something that is actually a supplement in some cases. Some people take it, but some of the kids we help are very sensitive, especially when they're taking a higher dose of cannabis. They can't tolerate that much chlorophyll. It makes them sick to their stomach. So by filtering it while it's in the freezer through a coffee filter into another mason jar, we filter out the plant waxes and the chlorophyll, which aren't necessarily things that are unhealthy for you, but in high concentrations they can make you sick, so make you nauseous, not sick. But so after it's filtered, we then put it in a flat glass pan and evaporate it in a vegetable dehydrator. This is the short version of the process that's described on the Cindy May page of Facebook. Once the evaporation takes place, sometimes before it all evaporates, we'll add a couple milliliters of MCT oil or liquid coconut oil, because that keeps it from becoming a very thick concentrate. When the alcohol all evaporates off in the bottom of this glass pan, you have a very sticky tar-like substance that's very difficult to handle unless you added a couple of milliliters of MCT oil or liquid coconut oil to it. You can scrape it up with a razor blade, for example. So that's your concentrate at that point, and that usually out of an ounce of marijuana you'll get probably 5 grams of the concentrate, and it depends on the strain a lot. Like May's Cannatonic is the strain that is a CBD high strain that's used, that Cindy May used to control her new seizure type. That strain, we only get maybe 2 to 3 grams of concentrate from. It's not really high in cannabinoids, but it's critical for some kids, especially for seizure control. Where other strains are a lot higher in medication. It also depends on the grower and how long they let the plant, and they kept the plant in flower, how many crystal trichomes are left on it, and how much medicine is actually in the bud. But it's usually an average of about 5 grams per ounce. that you're left with. And those grams are usually in the range of anywhere from 600 to 800 milligrams of cannabinoids per gram. So,
Wow, very technical.
yes. And we're lucky enough that we can bring a sample to the lab in the state of Maine and have it tested, so we know what we're extracting. We know how many milligrams of each cannabinoid are found in it. We can have it tested for residuals, so we know if we used alcohol as an extraction, or we used BHO is sometimes used, we know if there are any residual solvents in the product. So both alcohol and butane. Butane boils off at about 70 degrees, so it's, as long as it's processed by a reputable person, it's almost impossible, but it's illegal in the state of Connecticut as an extraction method.
Now, I know you guys had talked a little bit about, not changing the topic completely, but a little bit about the use of medical cannabis for osteoporosis, osteopenia, bone loss, and compression fractures and stuff like that. There appears to be some evidence that it remineralizes the spine and helps patients. What are your thoughts on that? And are there certain strains that are better that you know of?
The ones indicated on the typical chart for cannabinoids include CBD, CBG, CBN, and THCV. THCV is found in very few strains and in very low concentrations, maybe a 2%, where you're talking about THCA and THC found in 20% numbers in strains. So it's in very low concentration. It tends to be in the Afghan strains from Afghanistan. And it's quite elusive, but it's becoming less so. I'm seeing it more and more on the lab results when I get lab results in the state of Maine. So it's in some of their strains, and I'm often seeing it in lab results that are from a garden mixture. Like in the state of Maine, a lot of our caregivers will donate trim to pediatric patients who are using it in a high dose. And so that's trim from all the plants and flowering in their garden. And this trim is all frosty and full of medicine, so it extracts to a great extraction, and we're finding THCV in more and more concentrates in some of this trim extraction. So it's hiding in some of the strains in Maine. So
what are some of the names of those strains if people were to look them up? Do you know any offhand, or is it just look for Afghan strains? Is that how it's...
Well, you could actually you could do a search on Leafly, and you can search for THCV and it'll tell you which strains you can find it in. And then you could ask the Connecticut dispensaries if they're carrying some of those strains. So, and the more people that call the dispensaries and ask, the more likely they are to seek out these strains and get them in stock. So,
and sometimes you can even write a letter to the growers or an email. They have an interactive kind of website thing, and you could tell them that that's what you were specifically looking for.
Right.
You know?
Is there a cross-reference somewhere between, because the Connecticut ones, they make up their own names, they don't have the...
Yeah,
Is there a cross-reference to them?
Yeah, there's, what's that one?
Leafly.
Leafly
is one. There are other sites too that will list
So you can put in
names.
the Connecticut name and it will tell you the generic.
No,
There's something.
No?
I don't know that one.
dabandad.com, and then you do it backwards.
D-A-B-B-I-N.
That one I don't know.
All one word.
dabandad.com, and then you kind of work it backwards and you can figure out, yes. Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Any questions? Jay? Do you have any questions? No? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, Susan, anything to add? Any parting words of wisdom?
This support your political candidates that are supporting your programs, like Jonathan Harris, right?
Yep.
Running for governor. That's phenomenal. If you could get some people in office that are supportive, you can see an expansion of conditions and hopefully the ability to grow your own eventually. It's a huge difference. Being able to grow your own means you can then juice those leaves and you're not throwing out all that trim, and you're able to extract that trim and make your own medicine.
Yes, and if you look, if you want a more detailed viewpoint from him, from Jonathan Harris, we interviewed him on our TV series High Stakes So you could go on YouTube, look up High Stakes, and it's episode 4, and he's on there, and he explains his full vision for legalization of cannabis, eventual legalization, with some logic. So if you're interested in knowing a little more, you could do that too. All right, well, thank you very much, Susan.
You're welcome.
Insightful as ever.
It was great being here.
Thank you.